We all remember the adrenaline rush of a great action movie, the explosions, the chases, the impossible stunts that somehow feel real. We celebrate the heroes, quote the lines, and relive the moments again and again. But what if the films that hit the hardest weren't the ones built for success? What if the movies that redefined action were never supposed to work in the first place? In an industry obsessed with formulas, big names, big budgets, and predictable arcs, there exists a handful of films that broke every rule. Their scripts were laughed at, their directors were unproven, their stars were fading or non-existent. Some were financed on shoestring budgets, others were salvaged from creative chaos. These weren't passion projects, they were last chances, backup plans, or accidents waiting to happen. And yet, they worked. Somehow. Miraculously. These films not only survived the system, they cracked it wide open. They didn't just find audiences, they created them. They didn't follow trends, they set them. Some became cult classics, others box office monsters, and a few quietly rewrote the rules of cinematic storytelling. Why did they succeed? Was it luck, timing, or was there something deeper, something raw and urgent that polished productions could never fake? These aren't your typical behind-the-scenes stories. These are the underdogs, the rejects, the disasters in waiting that clawed their way to greatness. Each one a reminder that sometimes the most explosive films come from the most unstable foundations. Let's dive into 15 action movies that shouldn't have worked but did, and in doing so, uncover the beautiful chaos that made them unforgettable. Fact 1. El Mariachi, 1990. 2. Imagine making an action movie with less money than a used car and ending up with a trilogy. In 1992, a 2-3-year-old Robert Rodriguez had no Hollywood contacts, no formal training, and only $7,000 to his name. Instead of chasing studio deals, he checked himself into a medical testing facility to earn cash as a human lab rat. That's how he financed El Mariachi, a low-budget Mexican shoot, M-up that he intended to sell straight to VHS rental stores. Armed with a borrowed camera, a homemade wheelchair dolly, and non-professional actors from small Mexican towns, Rodriguez filmed the story of a traveling mariachi who's mistaken for a gunslinger. Scenes were often shot in single takes to conserve film, and most sound was dubbed later. Gunshots were mimicked using condoms filled with fake blood and squibs triggered by string. Everything about the production screamed amateur. Then fate intervened. A Columbia Pictures executive stumbled upon the VHS and saw past its rough edges. Suddenly, El Mariachi was no longer a backyard experiment. It was a feature film with a national release. The movie stunned critics, won the Audience Award at Sundance, and launched Robert Rodriguez into the spotlight. Ironically, Rodriguez never intended for anyone outside Mexico to see it, and yet, El Mariachi became a testament to what pure creativity and zero oversight can achieve. It wasn't meant to be a success, but it ignited a career, redefined indie action, and reminded the industry that vision often trumps budget, and it wouldn't be the last time a no-name team made Hollywood look slow. Fact #2. Mad Max, 1979. What happens when you shoot a post-apocalyptic action film with no apocalypse and barely a crew? In 1979, former ER doctor George Miller decided to direct his first feature film. With a minuscule budget of $350,000, no studio backing, and only marginal experience in filmmaking, Mad Max was cobbled together with used camera gear, borrowed vehicles, and a cast of largely unknown actors. One of them, a young drama student named Mel Gibson. The shoot was borderline guerrilla. Real roads were closed illegally. Many stunts were performed without permits or insurance. One iconic explosion, it was triggered with actual gasoline and no safety team. The film's infamous high-speed chases through the Australian outback were captured with cameras strapped to motorcycles, wielded by cinematographers inches from death. And yet, what emerged wasn't a disaster. It was a vision, raw, aggressive, and dripping with style. Mad Max tapped into a universal fear, societal collapse at the hands of our own speed, obsessed instinct. It exploded at the international box office, becoming the most profitable film of its time relative to budget. The twist? Hollywood didn't know what to make of it. The film was dubbed in American English for US release studio execs, thought the Aussie accents were too weird, but fans knew better. A cult was born. Mad Max shouldn't have worked. But it didn't just work, it launched a franchise that would span decades. And next came a film with even fewer resources but a louder voice. Fact #3, The Raid, Redemption, 2011. Would you watch a movie where 90% of the dialogue is replaced with pure violence? In 2011, Welsh director Gareth Evans was living in Indonesia when he stumbled upon a little-known martial art called pencak silat. Intrigued, he partnered with stuntman Iko Uwais to shoot a bare-bones action flick about a police team raiding a drug lord's building. The premise was simple. The execution? Anything but. With a budget of under $1.1 million, The Raid. Redemption was shot almost entirely in one decrepit building, using handheld cameras and natural lighting. There was no CGI, no A-listers, no fancy sets, but what it lacked in gloss, it made up for in brutality. Every punch, kick, and bone-crunching fall felt real because it almost was. The cast trained obsessively, and fight scenes were filmed in long takes with minimal cuts, forcing actors to perform nearly flawless choreography under pressure. One sequence involving a machete and a stairwell took 7 days to shoot. When the film premiered at Toronto International Film Festival, the audience erupted. Critics called it the purest action film in decades. Quentin Tarantino praised its relentless energy, and Hollywood studios rushed to option a remake. The irony? The Raid was originally written as a way to practice shooting action, a warm-up for another film that never got made. Sometimes, perfection comes when you stop aiming for it. But what if your career was already over, and a dog became your co-star? Fact #4. John Wick, 2014. They thought he was done. Then he killed 84 people over a puppy. By 2014, Keanu Reeves was largely dismissed by Hollywood as a fading star. His recent films had underperformed, and he was quietly drifting into the indie circuit. Enter John Wick, a script about a retired hitman seeking revenge for his murdered dog. It sounded ridiculous. Studios passed, executives smirked, but Reeves saw something else: redemption. Behind the camera were two stunt coordinators, Chad Stahelski and David Leitch, making their directorial debut. Neither had helmed a feature before, but they brought something no one else had: a revolution in how action was filmed. Instead of chaotic shaky cams and rapid cuts, John Wick introduced clean, balletic gun-fu sequences, shot in long takes with intricate choreography. Reeves trained for months in judo, jiu-jitsu, and firearms. He did 90% of his own stunts. Every frame felt deliberate, precise, and mythic. The film's world-building was equally strange and compelling. Gold coins, blood oaths, a hidden society of assassins operating out of luxury hotels. It was action cinema dressed like noir mythology. John Wick premiered to modest expectations. It became an instant cult classic. Then it built a billion-dollar franchise. The twist? The dog? The emotional heart of the film wasn't even in the first draft. And yet, it was that one irrational death that reawakened an entire genre. And now, let's go way back to when an action legend was born out of pure rejection. Fact #5. First Blood, 1982. What if the hero of one of the most violent franchises was never supposed to survive the first film? Before Rambo became a symbol of muscle-bound patriotism, he was a broken man in a quiet, bleak thriller called First Blood. Released in 1982, the film told the story of John Rambo, an ex-Green Beret, pushed to the brink by a small-town sheriff's harassment. But its path to the screen was a bloodbath of its own. The project languished in development hell for nearly a decade. Over 26 scripts were written. Multiple actors, Steve McQueen, Al Pacino, even Dustin Hoffman turned down the role. When Sylvester Stallone finally signed on, he hated the dialogue so much, he rewrote almost every line. The biggest issue? The ending. In the original cut, Rambo dies by suicide, a tragic full circle to his war trauma. Test audiences were horrified. Stallone fought to change the ending, insisting the character deserved a future, not a funeral. Reluctantly, the studio agreed. The film, released with the altered ending, shocked critics and audiences alike. It wasn't just an action film, it was a psychological character study laced with PTSD, alienation, and brutality. And it worked. First Blood became a commercial success, spawning a franchise and a myth. Ironically, the version where Rambo dies still exists. But the version where he lives? That's the one that rewrote 1,980 seconds masculinity. Next came a film so simple, so absurd, it shouldn't have even gotten greenlit. Fact #6. Speed, 1,994. How do you make an entire movie about a bus that can't slow down and make it thrilling? In 1994, Speed looked like a joke on paper. A bomb is rigged to a city bus. If it drops below 50 miles per hour, it explodes. That's it. Critics dubbed it Die Hard on Wheels. Even Keanu Reeves, fresh off Point Break, was skeptical, especially after reading a script that included lines like, "The bus jumps the freeway gap." The original director left the project. The studio nearly canceled it. Then came Jan de Bont, a cinematographer making his directorial debut. He insisted on practical effects, real stunts, and tight pacing. Reeves agreed on one condition: no cheesy one-liners. The film's climax, where the bus jumps a missing highway, was filmed using a hidden ramp. The bus actually flew through the air. The reaction shot of Sandra Bullock screaming wasn't acting, she thought the stunt had gone wrong. Speed wasn't supposed to work, but its simplicity became its strength. It was relentless, breathless, and expertly paced. Audiences were hooked from the opening elevator sequence to the final subway crash. The twist? The studio nearly released it without a musical score. Composer Mark Mancina delivered the soundtrack 2 weeks before release and saved the film's tension in the editing room. It went on to win 2 Oscars and became a template for 1,990 seconds action thrillers. But what if your lead actor wasn't an action star but a 5-6-year-old Shakespearean? Fact hekje 7. Dake 2008. He wasn't supposed to be an action hero. He was supposed to be retired. By 2008, Liam Neeson was best known for intense dramas and tragic roles. At 56 years old, he was cast in a low-budget French-American thriller about a father rescuing his kidnapped daughter. Neeson assumed the film would go straight to DVD. Directed by Pierre Morel and produced by Luc Besson, Taken wasn't flashy, it was raw. And the script? Just enough plot to string together phone threats, hand-to-hand kills, and bone-crunching violence. Neeson trained in Krav Maga, transforming himself into a relentless human weapon. But it wasn't the fights that made Taken iconic. It was the phone call. "I will look for you, I will find you, and I will kill you." That 18-second monologue became an internet legend and a meme. The film exploded in popularity, grossing over $226 million worldwide and launching an unexpected trilogy. The irony? Neeson had planned to stop doing action after this role. Instead, it made him the face of a new genre: dad action, middle-aged men with nothing left to lose. He wasn't built for the role, but maybe that's why it worked. And speaking of impossible odds, what if your movie barely made sense but cracked the code of time itself? Fact hashite, Edge of Tomorrow, 2014. What if the best action film of the year had the worst title and nearly no one watched it? When Edge of Tomorrow premiered in 2014, it had everything stacked against it: a convoluted title, marketing that confused audiences, a release window sandwiched between superhero blockbusters, and a plot that sounded suspiciously like a Groundhog Day ripoff, but with alien. Based on a Japanese light novel titled All You Need Is Kill, the film starred Tom Cruise as a cowardly PR officer forced to relive the same day, dying over and over until he becomes humanity's last hope. Emily Blunt played a hardened warrior known as the Full Metal Bitch. The action was sharp, the humor surprising, the pacing relentless. But the twist? Warner Brothers had no idea how to market it. They even toyed with changing the title after the theatrical run, rebranding the Blu-ray as Live, Die, Repeat, which had been just the tagline. Despite critical acclaim, Edge of Tomorrow underperformed at the US box office, but word of mouth wouldn't die. It became a massive hit in home media, praised for its smart structure, sharp direction, and unexpected emotional core. It wasn't just a sci-fi film, it was a meditation on failure, repetition, and what it takes to earn heroism, and all from a film that almost died in the edit bay. But now, let's rewind even further to a movie that redefined action for an entire generation. Fact hash 9. The Matrix, 1999. A film pitched as philosophy meets kung fu shouldn't have become a cultural earthquake. When The Matrix was greenlit by Warner Brothers, no one quite understood what the Wachowskis were trying to do. Their pitch included dense philosophical references, anime inspirations, and storyboards that looked more like comic books than Hollywood cinema. Studio executives were skeptical, especially since the directors had only made one prior film. Keanu Reeves, cast as Neo, underwent months of fight choreography training. The film's visual style leaned heavily on Hong Kong wire-fu techniques, bullet time effects, and cyberpunk minimalism. The dialogue was cryptic. The premise, humans unknowingly trapped in a simulation, was nearly impossible to explain in one sentence. But when audiences saw the finished product, jaws dropped. The slow-motion bullet dodging, the rooftop chase, the red pill, the blue pill. Every frame felt like a revelation. What many don't know is that the Wachowskis shot an entire action sequence with their own money just to convince the studio to trust them. They gambled and won. The twist? The Matrix opened just weeks before Star Wars, Episode 1, and still managed to dominate the cultural conversation. It didn't just work, it became a template for 21st century action, fashion, and philosophy. But what happens when your lead character isn't dodging bullets but literally dying every 10 minutes? Fact: Hasson Zero. Crank, 2006. What if an action movie played like a video game with no pause button? In 2006, Crank came out of nowhere. It starred Jason Statham as a hitman poisoned with a synthetic compound that would stop his heart unless he kept his adrenaline levels dangerously high. The plot? Thin. The logic? Non-existent. But the energy? Off the charts. Shot in guerrilla style with digital handheld cameras, the film was designed to look and feel like a live-action video game. Directors Mark Neveldine and Brian Taylor did much of the camera work themselves, often skating through scenes with handheld rigs for maximum chaos. Every scene one up the last. Public sex, electrocution, shootouts, drug overdoses, all stitched together with a pulsing electronic score and no time to breathe. It wasn't just fast, it was reckless. Most studios passed on it. Critics didn't know what to make of it, but younger audiences got it. Crank became a cult hit, and its absurd sequel, Crank, High Voltage, doubled down on the insanity. The twist? Statham insisted on doing many of the stunts himself, including being strapped to a motorcycle flying through traffic with no helmet. Crank shouldn't have worked, but it tapped into something primal, pure kinetic cinema without pretense. And that raw momentum would soon find its way to a film about aliens, apartheid, and found footage. Fact: Hassanon. District 92009. What do you do when your blockbuster collapses and you hand the reins to an unknown? District 9 wasn't supposed to exist. Originally, director Neil Blomkamp was hired by Peter Jackson to helm a big-budget adaptation of the video game Halo. But when the project fell apart due to funding disputes, Jackson didn't walk away. Instead, he handed Blomkamp a modest $30 million to make whatever he wanted. The result? A mockumentary-style sci-fi action film shot in the slums of Johannesburg, blending apartheid allegory with alien invasion. No stars, no capes, just raw storytelling and a lead actor, Charlton Copley, who had never acted professionally before. The film's gritty aesthetic came from its roots. Much of the dialogue was improvised. The alien technology was rendered with near-seamless CGI, despite budget constraints. And the emotional core? A bureaucrat slowly turning into the very creature he once oppressed. Audiences had never seen anything like it. District 9 became a breakout hit, earning 4 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture. The twist? Blomkamp reused leftover designs and concepts from the canceled Halo movie to build the alien tech and visuals. From failure, he crafted something original. It was born from a dead franchise and breathed new life into sci-fi action. But next came a film that ditched every rule by showing everything from the killer's eyes. Fact: Hasson 2. Hardcore Henry, 2015. Can you survive a movie shot entirely in first person? Hardcore Henry didn't just break the fourth wall, it lived inside it. Released in 2015, the film was shot completely from the point of view of its main character, like a real-time video game where the viewer becomes the hero. Directed by Ilya Naishuller, a Russian rock musician turned filmmaker, the movie was built using GoPro cameras mounted to helmets, worn by stuntmen, cameramen, and even the director himself. It took years to plan and over 100 hours of raw footage to stitch together the final cut. The story? A cybernetically resurrected man must rescue his wife from a psychotic villain. The plot barely matters. What kept audiences hooked was the visceral mayhem parkour, rooftop chases, brutal shootouts, knife fights, and zero breathing room. There was no protagonist's face, no exposition-heavy scenes, no Hollywood safety net. Most studios turned it down. Critics were divided, some praised its audacity, others called it nauseating. But action fans? They embraced the chaos. The twist? The film was funded in part through Indiegogo, with fans donating to bring the point-of-view dream to life. It was a collective gamble, and it paid off. Hardcore Henry isn't for everyone, but it proved that in action, cinema, perspective is everything. Now imagine rebooting a failed comic book character with no hype, no press, and no face. Fact: Hasson 3. Dread, 2012. How do you erase a cinematic embarrassment and make no one notice? In 1995, Judge Dredd, starring Sylvester Stallone, flopped hard. It was campy, over-designed, and most damning of all, Dredd took off his helmet. Fans never forgave it. Fast forward to 2012. Without fanfare, without a major marketing push, Lionsgate quietly released Dredd, a reboot of the comic book antihero. It had a modest $45 million budget and starred Karl Urban, hardly a household name, who insisted on never showing his face. The film's tone? Grim, minimalist, and brutally violent. Shot in South Africa, Dredd used high-speed phantom cameras to create surreal, slow-mo drug effects. Entire sequences felt like a ballet of blood in slow motion. The plot was refreshingly simple. Two judges, trapped in a mega building, controlled by a drug lord, the Raid, but with helmets and shotguns. Despite a limited theatrical release and low box office numbers, Dredd became a cult sensation. Fans praised its loyalty to the source material, its clean choreography, and its refusal to compromise. The twist? Most of its long-term success came after its release through home media, word of mouth, and fan campaigns for a sequel that still hasn't happened. It was a film made for no one and ended up loved by everyone. And next, we visit a world where heroes wear spandex but bleed like us. Fact Hassan 4, Kick-Ass, 2010. What happens when a superhero film tells the truth and bleeds for it? In 2010, Kick-Ass arrived like a punch to the face of the superhero genre. Adapted from the ultra-violent comic by Mark Millar, it featured a teen with no powers, no skills, and no plan, just a scuba suit and a dream. He gets beaten, stabbed, and nearly killed before the opening credits are over. Directed by Matthew Vaughn, the film was rejected by every major studio for being too violent, too foul-mouthed, and too risky. No one wanted to touch it. So Vaughn financed it independently, then sold it back to the studios once it was finished. What set Kick-Ass apart wasn't just its gore or profanity, it was its honesty. Real people trying to be heroes get hurt, bad. And yet, the film wasn't cynical. It was chaotic, heartfelt, and deeply funny. The standout? Hit Girl, played by one-year-old Chloe Grace Moretz, who swore like a gangster and sliced like a samurai. Her presence ignited a firestorm. Some called it child exploitation. Others saw it as genius. The twist? Despite having no MPAA rating for most of production, Kick-Ass scored a wide release and earned over $96 million globally. It became a cult hit and opened the door for rated superhero films like Deadpool and Logan. It shouldn't have worked, but sometimes, telling the truth, even a bloody one, is the boldest superpower. But for our final film, we return to a warrior we thought we already buried one last time. Fact Hassan 5, Rambo, Last Blood, 2019. What do you do when your story already ended but the rage still burns? By 2019, John Rambo had faded into cinematic memory. His arc from broken veteran to global symbol of explosive justice seemed complete. So when Rambo, Last Blood was announced, many scoffed. Another sequel? To a character defined by the Cold War? But Sylvester Stallone wasn't trying to revive Rambo. He wanted to bury him properly. Set decades after the previous film, Last Blood finds an older, quieter Rambo living on a ranch, haunted by loss. When his surrogate daughter is kidnapped, he descends once again into savagery. But this time, there's no jungle, just a maze of tunnels and traps. The film was brutally violent. Critics called it regressive. Many questioned its politics, and yet it struck a chord. Stallone insisted on practical effects for the final showdown. Limbs are severed, bodies crushed. It's not stylized, it's personal. Grief turned into warfare. The twist? Despite backlash, the film earned over $91 million on a $50 million budget, outperforming expectations and giving fans what they secretly wanted, a final war. It was never meant to please everyone. It was meant to end something, and sometimes that's all a story needs. Bonus fact: Equilibrium, 2002. This one didn't make the top 15, but it might just be the strangest of all. Equilibrium had everything working against it: a first-time director, a recycled sci-fi plot, a release date buried under studio apathy. Even the title meant nothing to most viewers. But inside this forgotten film was a revolution, literally. Set in a dystopian future where emotions are illegal and art is contraband, Equilibrium starred Christian Bale as a government enforcer who begins to feel. What followed was a ballet of violence, gun kata, emotionless duels, and stylized combat scenes shot with icy precision. The choreography was so unique that audiences weren't sure how to process it. Part martial arts, part geometry lesson. The studio didn't know how to sell it. they dumped it into a limited theatrical release in the US, where it made less than $1 million. Most people never knew it existed, and yet it refused to die. On DVD, the film became a quiet storm. Fans passed it around like a secret. Action directors cited it as an underground influence. Bale's performance, cold but cracking, was praised in retrospect. Gun kata, once a punchline, became a reference point for future stylized action. The twist? The director, Kurt Wimmer, invented the entire martial arts system himself in his living room. Equilibrium failed on paper, but in the shadows, it built a legacy, proof that even forgotten films can fire the loudest shots. So now we ask you, which of these films shocked you the most, not just with their stories, but with the fact that they ever got made? Was it the $7,000 revolution of El Mariachi, the philosophical chaos of The Matrix, or the quiet fury of Rambo's final chapter? Sometimes, the best action doesn't come from precision, it comes from desperation, accident, or rebellion. Tell us, which forgotten underdog deserves to be remembered the loudest?